How y'all doing?
Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Tiana. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. For those of you who have not been here yet, this is a YouTube channel dedicated to anti-MLM content, unethical business practices, and just some shady shit, y'all. So please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified every time I post a video. So today I want to talk about MLMs and politics and how MLMs are inherently political, and if we are going to be anti-MLM, we also need to be political because if we actually want to address the root cause of the issue, doing reaction videos and making fun of Huns isn't going to give us much resolve. Like, it might make a difference in like the public court of opinion, but when it comes to actually addressing the real root of the issue, you guys, it's political. And so I want to explain the history of MLMs and more notably the history of Amway and Amway's political influence on not just the Republican Party, but on America and American modern day capitalism as a whole. The research that I did in acquiring the information for this video, I learned a lot, you guys, and if I could put everything into this video I would, but I can't. I've got to reduce it down to something that is digestible, but I am going to link everything down below. So the main piece of research for today's video was a dissertation written by someone named Devor Mondam, and this was for them acquiring their PhD at Syracuse University. The dissertation is called Apostles for Capitalism, Amway, Movement, Conservatism, and the Remaking of the American Economy, 1959 to 2009. So this really explores Amway's founding, Amway's interwoven connectivity to American capitalism throughout time and history, and moving forward, how they have continued to make influence on our, not just like our political system and American conservatism on the right, like as we know it today, but just in general, the literal ideology that the Republican Party has adopted is very similar to the ideology that J. Van Andel and Rich DeVos crafted when they were crafting Amway, and a lot of the ideology that they put forth when they were creating their vision of Amway. So while we don't want to get political, like not getting political, you guys, to me is one of the most annoying things, to tell somebody that you don't want to discuss politics with them when it affects them negatively. It's just a stance of privilege, you guys. So I don't know, I implore you to break down that wall, I guess, that idea that we shouldn't be discussing politics, and that politics aren't, that we need to maintain this civility all of the time, because if we want to actually address the issue or we want to get where we're going, it's not going to be an easy discussion. So what started my research on this topic was when I had stumbled across the Main Street bubble after reaching out to Robert Fitzpatrick. Robert Fitzpatrick is the president of Pyramid Scheme Alert, and Robert Fitzpatrick is also coming out with a book that should be out by the end of this year, early next year, and it's called Ponzi-nomics. I want to read you guys the preface or the synopsis of this book so that you know what's on the horizon and what this discussion topic is, but I want to also let you know that I will be taking the time to read this book as well. So Ponzi-nomics by Robert L. Fitzpatrick, author of False Prophets, is the first comprehensive account of how multi-level marketing was created in America, escaped criminal and civil prosecution, and spread all over the world. It is the first book to fully explain how the legitimate business of direct selling was turned into a pyramid scam. Ponzi-nomics dissects the elements that distinguish multi-level marketing as a swindle, not sales, and reveals how a business could become delusional belief. Ponzi-nomics reveals how multi-level marketing helped to lay a foundation on Main Street for the presidency of Donald Trump, with a program of pervasive deception, financial self-destruction, authoritarian leader worship, and economic make-believe. Ponzi-nomics is a discomforting look at the threads of American culture, business, and politics that were woven into what has become the largest scam in American history. So that's a book that's on the horizon. The small document that I'd found from Robert was what had prompted my initial video into this topic, and then I discovered this dissertation, and I thought, you guys, I can't make this video without reading this dissertation, and I was right, because I just learned so much. I learned so much, and again, I would implore you to read this if you have the time, the energy, the stamina, if you want to, or if you're content just getting, you know, the TLDR from me. Okay. Now let's get into this dissertation and what I learned. So the first thing that really sets the stage is that we learn about the hometown of Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos. Now, for those of you who don't know, Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos are the founders of Amway. Amway is one of the most notable, if not the most notable, multi-level marketing company in the history of American history. And they are, again, most notably known for their 1975 Amway case, in which they were trying to say they were a pyramid scheme, and they were like, no, they're not a pyramid scheme. And, you know, there's videos about that if you guys want to. That's not where we are right here, right now. So essentially that's these are the founders of Amway, and it's really, really important to understand not just the founders of Amway, but their cultural upbringing and their history of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So Grand Rapids, Michigan is home of Dutch European settlers in the 1800s, Dutch migrant settlers. And so their Dutch migrant lineage sets the stage for the beliefs that the community of the northern Grand Rapids, like the Dutch community, or just the community, had in general in Northern America from the settlers, like that little pod. There were different pods settling, and so in the South, you've kind of got this conservative movement happening, but it's very much tied to slavery. And we can see here in this 1860 census, when we look at Grand Rapids, Michigan, there is not a significant portion of enslaved people. So Jay and Rich, their community, grew up very independent of Southern conservatism. So I think it's just really important to note that the ideology that stemmed from this area was very much different than the conservative ideology that stemmed from the southern portion of the United States. And there is another conservative movement that's happening simultaneously in the West, and there's another conservative movement happening in the North, and this really centered around Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the Dutch settlers that came there. So religiously, the Dutch settlers that settled in Grand Rapids, Michigan were Calvinist. Calvinism, when we learn about Calvinism, there are some characteristics that are just altruistic of that religion in general, and one of those things is like success coming through merit, or like merit-based success in life, and this idea of free enterprise. And I actually learned that the very first people to practice modern day capitalism were actually the Dutch in wherever the Dutch people live. I don't know, because it's not in Deutsch. The Dutch don't live in Deutsch. You know what I mean? Like, it's like for somebody who can read a whole book, it's like, where are the Dutch from?
Spell red.
Red. L-S-T-E-R.
All right. Is that your final answer?
My final answer.
Not Amsterdam. The Netherlands. Oh my goodness. Like, geez, it's been a long couple days. You guys, it was a long weekend. I read a long book. So yeah. That is one of the first things that really sets the stage, is that we learn about the Dutch settlers of Grand Michigan, their Calvinistic religious background, and how that background really set the stage for modern day capitalism. And a lot of what they believed in their religion was that you work hard and you give back to your community, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's a lot of what the religious communities teach, is that you should want to give back and help others. Also, as well, capitalism, you guys, the definition of capitalism, I've got it written down here just so we know. For those of you who don't know, capitalism is an economic political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. So a big push as far as capitalism goes is that, that everything is privatized. Private sector controls healthcare, business, the private sector is the main movement of, the main mover of money and things. So now that we have an understanding of the history of Grand Rapids and the cultural background of Grand Rapids, it gives us a better understanding of the upbringing of Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos. Also, you guys, I'd just like to point out that this is post-Great Depression era when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president, and he signed the New Deal, which generated a lot of social programs for people. And to many people, it redefined the role of government and how the government could help the people in times of distress. And he also took the United States off of the gold standard at the time because many people were lining up at the banks to hoard physical gold. So taking the United States off of this gold standard stopped people from coming in and creating shortages at the bank. So in the 1940s, Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos were in high school. They both went to a private high school, and a private Christian high school at that, actually. And I remember reading that high school enrollment at the time was extremely low, that you were enrolled in a high school and a private high school. It was a rarity of their times. And Jay Van Andel also drove a car, and he used his car as almost like a business venture, and it's what brought Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos together.
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
Jay Van Andel would charge people a few cents here and there to drive them to school and pocket some gas money. And one time, Jay Van Andel's family had asked him to drive to Bozeman, Montana. Rich DeVos said, "Count me in." And I don't know, I guess they went on this road trip together, and it solidified their friendship, and they became homies to the max. And the rest literally actually was history, literally so history. And these guys become friends. They're businessmen at heart. They're go-getters. It's a part of their upbringing, free enterprise, working hard. They had come from family lineage of people owning businesses and working hard and going out of their way to work hard. So this wasn't new to them. I believe it was one of their grandfathers owned a shoe business, and in their ventures as well, they started a number of businesses together. They had started a drive-in movie theater. They started a pilot school, which later ran into some legal trouble, which we find out that legal trouble, Jay and Rich are not shy of legal trouble. What else do they open a restaurant, I'm pretty sure. And I don't know, they just have these business ventures, and it comes to, it talks about how they were split for a small period of time in the 1940s during the war, and they had both served in different capacities and reunited after the war. And after reuniting after the war, they opted to go on a long-term cruise trip around the States, basically, and they hightailed it around, and they made a number of stops, and they stopped in a lot of, I believe they stopped in like Rio de Janeiro, and I don't even know, Colombia, I want to say they stopped, they just stopped in some places that were a little bit more corrupt as well and didn't have this free enterprise, this American entrepreneurial spirit that existed where they were living. They were traveling around to places where they thought like they were really lucky that the government wasn't corrupt and wasn't abusing the people the way that they were to get the things that they were. So I understand how they can come back. And they basically said that they were just, they had never felt more grateful to be where they were from and to have the opportunities that they were from. And I think that all of this is okay for Jay and Rich. I think the problem that transcended was assuming that everybody was in the same position as them to achieve the same things as them, and it really bred this like, if you work for it you'll get it, like no matter how hard you work you can achieve things. And to some degree that is right, but there, to another degree, there is also a difference in privilege, you know what I mean? Like the fact that these were two young white men in this time period. You know, this is before the civil rights movement. This is before women even got the right to vote. So, you know, two white men in this time period, both high school educated with access to a car and access to a boat. And so a lot of people, I don't imagine in that time really even left their neighborhood or left too far off of the beaten path. So I think that they were an adventurous pair to begin with, and it really pushed their, I don't know, their projective ideals onto other people and where they see other people being able to gather success from. The dissertation takes a moment to talk about this time period, this time period that Jay and Rich were coming up in this post-war era where like oil prices are down, the baby boomer situation is just starting to happen, so there's this demand for consumer goods, government spending is up.
Cold War, rock and roll, civil rights, suburbia. These are some of the highlights of the baby boomer generation.
So at this point in time, people are returning to post-war life. Jobs are kind of switching from being blue-collar jobs to being white-collar jobs. We had this rampant production for wartime goods leading up to this post-war era where Detroit was infamously known like for what Detroit was known for producing cars in that time period, and steel, labor, and like that kind of stuff. Grand Rapids, Michigan was infamously known for woodworking and furniture and stuff like that. So that was kind of their claim to fame. So during that time, I don't know, they found a way to provide certain goods, but really we come into this shift where people aren't really working in coal mines, or they're not working out in the fields. People are starting to pick up this 9-to-5 job, your typical office job. Women are starting to gain jobs. You know, because if we remember during the World War II era, you've got people like Rosie the Riveter, you know, women stepping up to do jobs and assuming roles that they hadn't before. And women wanted to continue to work, but unfortunately women were still pegged to very female jobs, like being a secretary or something like that. But there was this also, like with this growth of the 9-to-5 job, was very much what we know today, like this impending doom, this anxiety, this meaninglessness.
Who am I? I don't know. I guess I have a lot of things to ponder.
What do I stand for? What have I become? Like, am I meant to be here on this planet to be tapping keyboard all day? So very much a lot of the existential thoughts that happen about our purpose and what we're doing in our job and all of that stuff, these feelings started to arise in this era. And they talk about how anxiety was up and self-help books were on the rise and people were taking more medication to help cope with the anxiety. Tranquilizer use was up the yin-yang. And not only were self-help books like starting to come about, but this positivity, this positive mindset is really like, this is where it all was bred. There were numerous writers at this time coming out with books about positive thinking, positive lifestyle, not surrounding yourself with negative people, and it really was what's kind of started a lot of the tropes that we hear in the MLM community as like an enticement still for being in the MLM, and also a lot of the same things about working hard and pushing through and persevering. A lot of that stuff was really formed in that era, though that messaging when these books started to come out about self-help. And during this time period where, yes, there was just like a lot of existential wondering of like, what is the purpose? Do I have a purpose in my work? And so we kind of, all of these things too, you guys, like everything is kind of happening. Like it's a big cauldron, you know, nothing happened in solidarity, an incident. Like no incident is singular, you know, like everything, it's interwoven to get us to where we are now. But the Amway, Rich Van Andel and Rich Van Andel and Jay Voss. Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel had such a huge and pivotal role in this self-help era, and Amway grew in this self-help era as well. So Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel, their friendship had been going along throughout this time period, and they are introduced to Neutralite through one of their cousins. I can't remember which one. I think it's Jay's cousin. And he's saying he's making an extra $1,000 a month selling Neutralite. So he gets the guys in on it. And Neutralite is one of the original direct sales companies, and they sold vitamins. They also had their fair share of issues and legal shake, and it's part of the reason that Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos ended up leaving Neutralite. Neutralite got in some hot water for making unsubstantiated health claims.
Nothing new, nothing changed, same old shit. Same old fucking shit.
Like, honestly, seriously. And to avoid staying with the company after they got in this hot water, I believe they had been with Neutralite after 15 years. Rich and Jay had accumulated a downline of over 1,000 distributors, and they discussed their hardships at the beginning, how when they first did their Neutralite spiel to a party at an open house, nobody showed up, and you know, it took a few weeks to get things going, but once they got one, they were on a roll, things were on and popping. And at this time too, like there are so many factors that influenced their success. The rise of the party planner, there was the rise of like GE washer machines and all of these new technology that people were showing off and sharing. And so direct sales became very popular. Door knockers became very popular. So we were in this society where it wasn't beyond somebody to show up at your door at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with the vacuum cleaner.
The house-to-house salesman symbolizes in a way the function of all salesmen, which is to bring goods or services to the attention of the consumer and to help the consumer buy. The good salesman helps the buyer. The measure of his success is not how many sales he makes, but how many customers he satisfies.
That was the way that goods and services were introduced to people, because people didn't have access to some of this stuff in the way that they did now. So it was really new for people, and people were introduced to a lot of new things. And there were companies like Avon that gave women an opportunity to sell things and still work from home and build a team of other women. And there were positives, you guys. I think at its core, if we really think about what the purpose of an MLM is and if it actually satisfied its objective, it would be awesome. MLMs would be great, but because they don't satisfy the end goal, like the main objective, they are not good. It's false promises and false lies, you know. But at its core, and direct sales, I think like direct sales at its core can have a really great entrepreneurial spirit and can give people freedom and flexibility. And if you do work hard, you can see success. But we learn throughout time, and as Amway got bigger and as they continued to gain these distributors, we learned that they're really not making money at all. And again, that the money comes from the recruitment of people, not from the real sale of the product. And the Amway guys caught on to this pretty early. They realized that people aren't taking out ads for their products. They realized that when people are taking out ads for Amway, they're taking out ads for the American dream.
So here in the text, we can see Amway wasn't just marketing products, they were selling salvation. An ad taken out in the East Liverpool, Ohio newspaper in February of 1960 stated, "Have you dreamed of having your own business? Let Amway show you how in sales. You can earn $1,000 a month in the first year with possible early retirement." Another in Austin, Minnesota's Daily Herald in 1963 said, "Opportunity unlimited for a person or couple in Amway full-time." Another ad stating, "Be your own boss, in business for yourself. Investigate the Amway opportunity that can change your life. Immediate profits." Another one stating, "Amway means guaranteed future. It's the best op in the USA."
And so from the very beginning of Amway's conception, they were always built on selling this dream. And so many other people adopted it. But they knew this dream was so seductive because it was so visionary, I think. And it was, at the time, what people needed to take back their lives because they had been trapped in this new cycle of 9 to 5. And then we get to a point where we start to discuss Rich DeVos's philosophy and his idea around what compassionate capitalism is.
So my understanding of compassionate capitalism is just repackaged neoliberalism, and I'm going to insert a clip of another YouTuber, Tom Nicholas, explaining neoliberalism. And if you guys have the time to watch this video as well, I highly suggest giving that a go. It's really educational, and it also helps to gain a better picture of American politics as a whole.
Neoliberalism is, at heart, a political ideology which holds that the primary bond between humans is not social, familial, cultural, political, or anything else, but instead purely economic. All of our interactions and associations with other humans are, neoliberalism posits, driven purely by self-interest and motivated by what we might stand to gain economically from that interaction or association. Far from viewing this as a negative, however, neoliberalism sees this as something to be celebrated and encouraged. For it argues that it is this self-interest that is the driving force of human progress, and thus that, as the character Gordon Gekko puts it in Oliver Stone's 1987 film Wall Street, greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
So I'm going to insert a clip of Rich DeVos at one of his conventions called Selling America, and he kind of touches on his idea of compassionate capitalism. And I don't know about you guys, but this doesn't sound very compassionate to me. But essentially his argument is that the absolute best way that you can help somebody is by giving them a job, and that is really about it. That they have in turn actually done more good for people, that giving them a job selling soap is actually better than any type of social welfare program that exists out there.
And so for those people who you will meet and who will be telling you that opportunity doesn't exist, I want you to stand up and say, I don't believe it. Because I happen to know that opportunity is greater today in this country than ever. And believe me, friends, there's more opportunity in business than any or all of you will ever be able to take advantage of. The challenges in industry are great. I keep reading about the fact that the kids in college today go into the social fields. You know, they want to work for the welfare of others. Well, if you got any guts, you'll get in business. Because we provide more welfare than anybody else. We provide employment for 72 million people. That's what we do. And you see, all these people who are talking about trying to help somebody else are only doing it because they don't have the guts to face the real challenge, which is taking on somebody else. And so they run around paying patty cake and say, well, I'll hold your hand. I'll help you. Help you nothing. Give them a job. That's what'll help them the most. But I get tired of these boys and their two-bit theories sitting over there, always telling me how important it is to help people, you know, and telling these kids it's all just the love of somebody else. Well, you better love them or you won't help them. But I'll tell you, you can help a lot more people our way than you can their way. We sell, you know what? Soap. And you know what they say? What? Didn't you ever hear of Lever Brothers? Did you ever hear of blue cheer, green cheer, brown cheer, no cheer, does, doesn't, didn't, wouldn't, shouldn't, could, you name it? Now, you talk about free enterprise, and that's why we have the greatest standard of living the world has ever known. Let me give you a few comparisons between Russia and the United States, because I hear more and more people tell me that our way is out of date. It's an interesting thing. If we're going to enjoy what they have in Soviet Russia, you know what we're going to have to do? If we're going to enjoy what they have, the first thing we're going to have to do is abandon 3/5 of our steel capacity and 2/3 of our petroleum output. Then we'll have to get rid of 95% of our electric motor capacity. Then we got to destroy 2 of every 3 of our hydroelectric plants. Then we'll get along on 1/10 of our present volume of natural gas. Then we'll rip up 14 of every 15 miles of our paved highways and 2 of every 3 miles of our railroad tracks. Then we'll sink 8 of every 9 ocean-going ships that we have, and we'll scrap 19 out of every 20 automobiles and trucks. Now, you know the problem, don't you? You see, what bothers the people in Russia is that they got all the parking places and we got all the automobiles.
Child. Anyway, so.
And so now I want to get into a little bit of the ideology and how this ideology transcends Amway and into American politics. It says DeVos believed that the Amway business model mirrored the ideas of compassionate capitalism. First, there was the emphasis of dream building. David John Harris has characterized dream building as the primary objective of Amway sponsors. The basic idea is to focus on goals, visualize them, see yourself working hard to get them, and one day owning them yourself. A booklet produced by Amway titled Passport to Success opened by asking, what are some of your dreams, before listing off some of the possibilities. A new home, a new car, travel, a college education for your children, the extra income you need to make ends meet every month. Steve Butterfield wrote that all presentations of the plan begin with an exercise that he called Building the Dream, during which the presenter would learn about what the wants and needs of his prospective recruits are while attempting to rev up their imaginations about what's possible through Amway. A skillful dreamer, he said, might pass around a Cadillac and Mercedes booklets, travel brochures, better homes, fashion magazines, letting his audience savor the images of wealth and status, cultivating dreams of money, luxury goods, and early retirement, debt-free living. That was an integral part of the Amway pitch. With dream building being so central to Amway, all of the elements of successful dream building under compassionate capitalism were also a part of the business. Amway stressed positive thinking as an essential ingredient in any successful distributorship. So, to them, this dream building is a part of being good in capitalism. It's a part of your duty to help people, is to get them thinking about the possibilities. And so if you think of it in that sense, I guess you can understand to why they thought it was important. But we soon find that the dream building is the scam when you start to tell people that they can achieve XYZ through means in which they cannot achieve that. That's where the scam starts to take place. It says that Richard DeVos outlined the contrast between Amway and other business businesses on a company-issued tape in 1977. He pointed out how jobs separated husbands and wives and hurt the family, saying the guy goes to work here and the gal goes over there. Your lives tend to drive apart because of economic situations. You have a job here, he has a job there. You have your buddies that you went out with from work, and she's got the girls that she went out with over here, and you tend to find your family kind of floating in the middle. Amway, on the other hand, brought families together, and he claimed that the company's emphasis on the family was an exclusive Amway thing. And it kind of was, in a sense. Primarily, I believe it was 2/3 of Amway distributors were actually husband and wife couples. So they really focused on taking people as pairs as well and selling them on the idea that they could do this together. And not only that, it's a lot of these same tropes that we see here today, and this idea that our families are breaking apart when we are working jobs that are out of the home, that if we're not together 24/7, that we're not okay, that we're not happy, that we're not connected as much as we could be or should be. And I don't know, I mean, I guess that's up for debate. We all have different priorities, but to me, it is interesting. To me, finding a meaningful job, it is important. I think to millennials and to the younger generation, finding meaning in what we do is really big. Before I don't know that, but I have found to believe that the older generations have been content with staying at a job for 20, 30, 40 years and retiring with that company. They don't want to lose their benefits or whatever it may be. And I don't know, unless there is room for change and growth with a company, I couldn't stay doing the same job for year after year after year. And so they play on this, and I understand they're like the want for meaningful work, and they've been playing on those insecurities of people for the last 60, 70, 80 years or whatever. But also, we get to this point where it just takes such a sharp turn, you guys. We start to get into all of these Amway legal proceedings. How they owed $20 million to Canada, how Korea didn't want them around, China didn't want them around. They bamboozled with China. They had to pay them, a little hefty bit of money. And then just a few months later, they were able to start selling again. There's hundreds of pages in which we discuss all of that, but we're going to gloss over all of the legal stuff. You guys know that Amway was involved in a lot of legal disputes throughout their time, and there was even a lawsuit that claimed that Amway distributors were writing off all these crazy things under the sun as tax write-offs, like pet food for their dogs, car washes, dinners, lunches, whatever it was. They were writing them all off as business expenses. So they were getting caught up in just like a lot of things here and there, and they still do, and they still are throughout time. But money speaks volumes, and they were able to cover up a lot of it. And even when they had bad press, like, it just kind of blew over. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
Is that one of your biggest wishes?
Yeah.
So another big thing to point out about their political ideology as well, they were very big on the idea of limited government intervention, states' rights, smaller groups and pockets of businesses and individuality, because they felt like as things got bigger, the less control you had of something, and that it was better that local, state, and municipalities knew what to do with the money better than any type of government entity could tell them what to do with the money. And they also felt that as a part of their idea around compassionate capitalism, that it was a company and it was a corporate responsibility to give back to the community in which they've made their money off of. So this kind of ties back into how much money the Van Andel family and the Devos family poured back into Grand Rapids, Michigan. And much of Grand Rapids, Michigan is built and paid for by private profit money that was gained privately, rather than through state or government federal funds. While they did have some, it was mostly privately funded. And so there's this big thing about once something gets too big, you lose control of it, though, and I really want to talk about that and how it's almost so bizarrely paralleled to the same thing that they talk about when it comes to the United States. Like, it so parallels the United States. Like, when you think about Rich and Jay being the Amway Corporation, almost being like this federal government in a sense, and not committing to oversight because they believe that people should be able to run and operate their things individually with limited oversight. And they found that these Amway distributorships started to take on lives of their own because they had no control over the way that people were conducting business. And once you lose control, it's hard to rein back in control rather than setting a precedent or like maintaining any type of regulation or stipulation over them. And I don't know, I just think that's an interesting parallel, is that their vision for running Amway and the business model is very much same to their vision for the United States and the business model, and how they just would like private for-profit companies to be the driving factor in our social and economic decisions and community and infrastructure building and all of that, like that they should make those decisions, but that it's also their duty to do that, rather than having a government entity that manages or regulates or puts any stipulation on that. Because when you think about it at the core, like, what is the number one thing we want as an anti-MLM community is that we want restrictions around these MLM companies because they've taken on a life of their own, and because of the way that people are able to misrepresent the truth. Because when you entrust that people are going to do the right thing, we find, I think more often than not, they actually don't do the right thing.
And when I say people don't do the right thing, I mean when people are faced with doing the right thing or gaining monetarily, oftentimes people will choose to gain monetarily than to do the right thing. But unfortunately, that's because we've hinged our society to be so reliant on money and our exchange of money and our relationship with money that we would choose money that just genuinely doesn't actually have any intrinsic value over helping somebody else, our neighbor, our friend, another person in need. We would rather err on the side of financial gain and economic gain than to help people. And I don't know, to me, I think that's just very bizarre at its core when you really, really think about it. But whatever, go off, conservative economics.
So I don't know, I just think it's interesting because much of the ideology that Jay and Rich then go forward to push is basically less government intervention to evade the government looking into them, their business practices, their business dealings, and to evade getting taxed more. They got behind huge deals like anti-tax legislation and things that were going to affect them in business. Amway's biggest political influence started to happen as we push into the 70s. There were certain things that had driven them to have these anti-liberal views, being that they were from Grand Rapids. There was a lot with like the big factory workers, there was a lot of unionization, and so the Devos and Van Andel family, being very religious, they were very anti-union, and they felt like the union promoted things that went against the church. They had different goals that, and they didn't align. So the Van Andel family, or just in general, the Dutch Calvinists in that like community, was very anti-union. And so it kind of separated them from liberalism from the beginning, because if we know anything about unions, they form a coalition of people, and it makes them, I guess, stronger in gaining more workers' rights. So I don't know, I think if you're somebody that's a fan of unions and you like want restrictions around these companies, I don't know, I think you tend to lean a little bit more towards liberal than wanting a completely 100% free enterprise capitalistic country in which we should hope that businesses do better and make better choices on our behalf. Because I think that we are in the like witnesses in the making that like companies don't do that, but whatever. So Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos had a long and close relationship with Gerald Ford. This states that one of the earliest and longest lasting political relationships that DeVos and Van Andel formed, unsurprisingly, was with Gerald Ford. Prior to becoming vice president and then president, Ford represented Grand Rapids in the House of Representatives for 24 years. Ford's election to Congress in 1948 represented a backlash against Grand Rapids' political machine, which for many years had been headed by Frank McKay. McKay dominated state Republican politics and had served a variety of posts in the city-state level since the 10s. Among the more prominent Amway relative events that Ford was president involved the Center for Free Enterprise, a dodecagonal building added to the company's Ada headquarters in the 70s. Ford addressed the ceremony marking the start of construction.
My affiliation with Amway covers more than 25 years during my service as a United States Congressman, Vice President, President, and now as a private citizen. The thousands of Amway distributors are dramatic proof that the American spirit of free enterprise is and will continue to be a vibrant force for good, both at home and around the world.
They established that American students were stupid as fuck and they didn't know economics, so they were going to start education initiatives to teach economics and free enterprise and capitalism around the nation. The center cost $3 million and officially opened on May 25th, 1973. Jay Van Andel wrote to Ford informing him of the planned May ceremony. We believe that the opening of the Center of Free Enterprise is an event of considerable national significance. We feel it deserves the attendance of a top official from the federal government for an address. Let's start at the top and suggest either president or the vice president. What do you think? The Center of Free Enterprise sought to spread free enterprise ideology throughout the wider population. In the early 70s, a number of business execs and politicians worried that Americans, especially young people, were, as they saw it, disturbingly ignorant of economics. In response, companies like General Motors, as well as U.S. Chamber of Commerce, provided educational materials to students and teachers throughout the country that promoted free enterprise under the guise of improving knowledge of economics. Walmart, meanwhile, played an instrumental role in bankrolling students in free enterprise, which targeted colleges and universities. The Center of Free Enterprise was part of this project. Along with the exhibits, the center played host to the Institute of Free Enterprise. Beginning in the 70s, the Institute organized yearly workshops for Grand Rapids area teachers to get grounding in economics. So they had a very, very, very big hand in the economic teachings across America and the way that people even view economics and have this economic understanding today. And to me, I think it's just kind of ironic that the companies, like the biggest business companies, are the ones that tout like no regulation the most, but whatever.
So I'd also just like to point out that since then, the wealth disparity in the United States has only gotten larger. The gap between the wealthiest Americans in this country and the poorest Americans in this country. And here we can see that incomes for the top 5% of families have increased faster for the most affluent people since 1980 than any other income group. Who does that include? Like, that includes people like the Waltons and Jay and Rich Van Andel and the DeVos family in general. Like, just the amount of money, these people only stand to get richer, and they continue to make policies in which they continue to get richer. And it's like, when you start to think about it, it's almost like, is America the pyramid scheme, you know?
So let's see, it also talks about Amway and the co-founders had already been involved with Taxpayers United, a campaign for Proposal E for several months. Amway made 3 $10,000 donations to Taxpayers United in March, May, and August of 1978. A financial sheet from Taxpayers United dated March 30th included Amway on its list of major contributors, along with a handful of other companies. The company even marshaled its Michigan distributor force on behalf of the amendment. In May, for example, the co-founders mailed out on company letterhead a note to their distributors encouraging them to sign petitions to get Proposal E on the ballot and consider to donating to Taxpayers United, assuring them that amounts as small as $5 would be heartily appreciated. In contrast to 1976, the 1978 effort paid off, albeit narrowly. Proposal E passed with 52% of the vote, a margin of victory of a mere 136,000 votes. Following the victory of Proposal E, Taxpayers United for Tax Limitation and the Taxpayers Federation of Michigan fused to form the Taxpayers United Federation. This new entity also had the backing of Amway and its co-founders, and on May 8, 1979, Noel Black sent a letter to the leadership of Tough notifying them that the group would receive $39,000 in seed money from Amway. These monies, he explained, should be viewed as the means by which the Federation can get off the ground and raise money to become a properly funded and operated organization to ensure proper implementation of the Tax Limitation Amendment and relative activities, including the possibility of additional initiatives. In addition to providing startup money for Tough, at least 2 high-ranking company officials, Noel Black and David Cullen, Amway's corporate official officers, belonged to its management. The same year that he helped Devos get Tough off the ground, Jay Van Andel became the U.S. Chairman of Commerce on May 1st. Before this, Van Andel had served as chamber in a number of other capacities. In 1980, Van Andel declared that combating inflation would require a new Congress, with members that are strong enough to make the hard decisions that need to be made. As chairman, Van Andel strove to spread his economic views as far and wide as he could. And in May 1980, an article in the Grand Rapids Press published after his chairmanship had ended indicated that Van Andel had visited 25 cities across the U.S. in addition to traveling abroad. The article also noted that Van Andel conservatively estimates that through his speeches and media coverage, his words have been heard by 25 million people. In his first day in the position, he held a press conference in which he called for cutting back on regulation as well as adopting a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In 1975, an organization called the National Taxpayers Union launched an effort to get states to demand a constitutional convention to pass a balanced budget amendment. By 1979, 30 had done so. That January, the movement took on national significance after California Democratic Governor Jerry Brown jumped on board. Republicans on Capitol Hill toyed with the idea, though little consensus emerged on the specifics. Democrats, on the other hand, were largely against it. Reagan's victory in 1980 arguably represents the height watermark of electoral conservatism, the triumph of several decades worked by movement activists. The co-founders were involved in both the 1980 campaign as well as the administration. Devos and Van Andel contributed $70,000 and $68,000 respectively to help elect Reagan, making them among his largest benefactors. When the 1984 presidential campaign came around, Amway helped organize a rally called Spirit of America, Salute to Free Enterprise, which was held on January 26th in Atlanta, Georgia.
People should have freedom to keep more of the money they earn to spend the way they want to, and not have the government taking more and more of their money to spend the way it wants to. Our critics sometimes forget that even after our tax cuts, the American people are shouldering a near-record peacetime tax burden. The other problem with raising taxes, as we've seen in the past, is that it simply encouraged government to spend more. And since people had less money in their pockets to spend or save, economic growth was hurt. So fewer people were employed and able to pay taxes. Deficits went up, not down. Tax revenues doubled between 1976 and 1981, but deficits increased. A recent study shows that countries with lower tax burdens have higher rates of economic growth and employment. Now, of course, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who understands incentives. We don't face large deficits because you're not taxed enough. We face those deficits because government still spends too much.
Reagan addressed the event, which served as the unofficial kickoff to his re-election ballot. Notably, there was some consternation with Reagan's team about associating the president with Amway. The Grand Rapids Press reported that Amway secured Reagan's appearance at the rally only after it removed its name from the event. One Reagan aide indicated that we decided we didn't want to do the Amway rally, in part because Amway had recently pleaded guilty to defrauding the Canadian government and was fined $20 million. Nevertheless, an article in the press published the day after the Atlanta indicated that the gathering took on a distinctive Amway flavor, due in large part to the presence of the co-founders, as well as the fact that Amway's distributors handed out half of the tickets to the event. In his speech, Reagan touted the economic progress made since the recession of a few years earlier and spoke the need to further slash taxes as well as government spending. Cutting back a runaway government which stifles the spirit of enterprise, he declared, could be profoundly positive, like performing surgery on a patient to save his life. Along with helping to elect and re-elect Reagan, the co-founders undertook a number of political ventures in the 80s. J. Van Andel remained a part of the Chamber's national leadership after his one-year term as chairman ended, chairing the Executives Committee from 1980 to 1985. In June 1985, Van Andel joined a panel of other business executives in front of the House and Ways Committee to offer his thoughts on Reagan's tax reform proposals. Although he complained that the president's proposal shifts some of the tax burdens from individuals to small business owners, lowered rates of the president's proposal will stimulate entrepreneurship. The 80s were much rockier for Richard DeVos, and DeVos became finance chairman of the National Republican Party. DeVos got the job in large measure on account of his success over the preceding year, leading to the party's Congressional Leadership Council, bringing in $1 million. When DeVos took over the GOP's financial operations, he looked to apply Amway-style methods to fundraising and introducing shareholder conventions. Drawing inspiration from Amway's own rally model, the idea was to stage events throughout the country that would galvanize grassroots Republican donors, encouraging them to give money as well as to reach out to people they knew to join the party. Despite a $100 million haul over his watch, DeVos was ousted on August 13th of 1982 because he allegedly concentrated too much on small contribution donors, leaving the party's mega donors feeling neglected. 2 years after the debacle at the RNC, DeVos got the opportunity to put his fundraising skills to work once again when, in May 1984, he was named finance chairman, as well as co-chair of the newly formed pro-Reagan group called Citizens America. 2 months later, DeVos went to the White House with other top figures from the group, where they met with Reagan along with some of his advisors. DeVos was drawn into controversy again in 1987. Reagan gave DeVos a seat on a new commission designed to tackle the AIDS epidemic. His appointment proved contentious for two reasons. First, the fact that he had lacked a background in medicine, and second, because his conservative religious views, which many saw as biasing him against gay people. That September, the ACLU and the Public Citizen Health Research Group criticized DeVos along with the three other individuals on the board for allegedly being extremists. The two organizations called on Reagan to expand the panel to include more people with direct experience dealing with AIDS, like doctors treating AIDS patients, research, and the suffering from the disease. These grievances were on full display when the panel met in D.C. that month. Protests outside the National Press Club headquarters, where hearings were taking place, chanted slogans like, "Richard DeVos, we cannot applaud. Amway admits Canadian fraud." Inside, an AIDS victim who came to testify lambasted the makeup of the committee, saying at one point, "You ought to have experts, not somebody convicted of fraud in Canada." In the aftermath of that tumultuous session, DeVos said that the committee could only succeed in its objectives if it cultivated greater credibility with the public. The entire 90s saw the end of Richard DeVos and Jay Van Al's tenure as president and chairman of Amway. And so they passed down Amway to Dick DeVos, and then we get to introduce the wonderful Betsy DeVos. The DeVos family, Betsy DeVos would not have gotten her role as Secretary of Education had she not had her history of political sway. I don't support her school voucher system. I think studies have shown that just school education has just been on the decline. But a lot of their policies and their beliefs stem from their early Dutch Calvinistic roots. And that, I think, to me, is one of the craziest things that I learned in all of this. But I don't want to, if like we start talking about Betsy Devos on top of that, you guys, this would be a 3-hour video. And
ain't nobody got time for that.
I already had to try to figure out how I could cut so much out of this to even get you guys this, what we're at right now, and there's still so much to be taken from this. Basically, Amway's families have been politically active since at least the 1970s, and it wasn't until the mid-2000s that Dick DeVos had tried his hand at running for governor in Michigan. And he did not succeed, and he was beat by his Democratic candidate. In 2016, the New York Times ran a story about GOP mega donors who were weary of Donald Trump. And among those who had expressed reservation was Betsy DeVos, who told the Times, until we have a better reason to embrace and support the top of the ticket and see an agenda that is truly an opportunity agenda, then we have lots of other options in which to invest and spend our time helping. Other members of the DeVos family did give money to help elect Trump. The Trump Victory Fund received $70,000 from Richard DeVos, as well as children Daniel and Suzanne, along with $35,000 from his son Doug. No contributions from Dick or Betsy, though Betsy instead directed her dollars towards House and Senate races. She donated to several Senate candidates, among them Joe Heck of Nevada, Rob Portman of Ohio, Mark Kirk of Illinois, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, and Marco Rubio of Florida, among others, as well as numerous House candidates, most of them representing districts in Michigan. Overall, Dick and Betsy DeVos are listed as the number 68 on the Center for Responsive Politics list on the largest individual contributors at the federal level in politics in the 2016 cycle, donating a little over $3.3 million. Richard and Helen DeVos, meanwhile, ranked number 59 with $3.84 million in contributions. Small business conservatism allows us to make sense of the paradox at the heart of Amway. On one hand, DeVos and Van Andel aggressively promoted free markets and railed against government intervention in the economy. At the same time, Amway's promoters were often very critical of actually existing capitalism, pointing out limits on upward mobility, as well as the fact that many people found their jobs dreary and unsatisfying. According to Amway and its co-founders, direct sales embodied an economic model that promised to provide material and psychological rewards unavailable elsewhere. DeVos called this compassionate capitalism. I just think that we have come to this point where we cannot trust businesses to do right by us. We see it in the way that Jay and Rich Van Andel ran their company. They consider themselves stand-up, righteous guys, religious guys at that. Yet they defrauded millions and millions of people out of millions and millions of dollars, yet still see it as their righteous duty. If we as a community want oversight over large corporations like this, or we want oversight over these MLM girls, I feel like inherently we need to start demanding oversight in general on these companies. We need to start demanding that the government take accountability for some of the missteps, because right now we're at a point where society that we live in America has been created by those who profit off of us. And so we should hope that they do things out of the benefit of us, but we really are in this chamber of where they've been acting out of their own self-interest for so long that, I don't know, it's like you start to break down that, like, even our political ideology that we center and frame, like, some of our politics around were formulated and created by people who were really just out to evade government intervention and taxation and just to get more into their pocket. Could have sat here for hours, you guys. There was a point in which I literally was like, I'm so overwhelmed. Maybe I just go live and we just talk about it, because there was just so much stuff. And it is so interconnected, you guys. It's just so interconnected, and I'm not sure if I was able to explain how interconnected it really is. It all starts with the ideology of these Dutch settlers and how it then merged with modern day conservatism. So that's really, I think, where a lot of the economic ideology of modern day conservatism has grown from. And it's really this pushback against government intervention, but I really feel like that pushback against government intervention stems from the sliminess of these big corporations who have the GOP in their pocket so that they can maintain their own interests. So you guys, like, in order to address multi-level marketing companies, like, we're going up against Amway, who has literally had their fingers in politics and legislation and laws, and not just Amway. There are other companies that then started to get in the mix as they got to be okay, you know what I mean? But like, Amway is the OG, and it's really important to just know how intertwined they are into our fabric of society, and how they really set the vision for American conservatism and free enterprise. And so that's kind of is like ironic that the people who stifle free enterprise the most and the people who take that away from the people the most are the people that parade it the most. But what they've done is they've hijacked the American dream, where they've convinced people that they are working for themselves and that they're entrepreneurs, while funneling money up to the big business and the big corporations. So it's like, it's everything that Amway rails against, Amway is, in a sense. So I don't know, you guys, I've been filming for so long, and I just hope that I got something out that you guys can take away and learn from. But what I want to do is I'm going to post the thing down below. If you'd like to read it, please read it. And what I want to do is I want to have a live as well, in which we can kind of discuss more of these topics and some of the more nuanced details to things as well. Maybe nobody else wants to effing read this and you guys don't want to have a discussion with me. Fine, whatever, I literally don't care. But maybe you do, and we'll just hold a live, and if there's 5 of us, there's 5 of us, kind of like a little mini book club. But we can really extrapolate on some of these ideas around Amway and the idea of free enterprise and the American dream and what that means, and maybe some ways that politically we could get involved to shift the tide, because I don't really see MLMs coming to a close. I think if anything, it's going to be getting regulation around them. So that's done politically, you guys. And so if you don't want to see the MLM distributors acting the way that they do, it's not going to come from me getting up here and doing a reaction video. I'm sorry. So I don't know any other way to tell you guys. It's political, and we've got to get our hands dirty in politics to make a difference for people. So I don't know. That's why I'm here. I'm not going to shut up just because you don't like that I said the word politics. So whatever. And I don't want to hear any whataboutism in the comments, like, well, Democrats this and that. That's not what this was about. That's not what this was about. That's not what this was about. Somebody posted something really great about Kamala Harris helping Herbalife slip through the cracks. So I'm going to do a little bit of research of that. We want to talk about, like, I will talk about Democrats and MLM influence, but like at the very root, at the very core, like the heart of MLMs lies within the GOP, the Republican Party, and Amway. So I don't know. That really is me laying facts for the last who knows how long when we edit it down. But I want to thank you guys, to anybody who tuned in, to anybody who watched this video, to anybody who waited for this video. I want to thank you guys for not only giving me the time to finish reading this book, but also, like, if it's boring, I'm sorry, you guys. Like, it's information. We're just here for information. I don't know. I've just been talking for so long. It's like, you know, when you're just like, shut the fuck up. Like, maybe you guys don't feel like that because you made it to this far, but I'm like, shut the fuck up. Maybe, I think you guys, we should all be like, yeah, Tiana, shut the fuck up. I'm going to shut the fuck up now. But there's just so many themes I want to explore within this. You guys, we can make like 75,000 videos off of so many different topics within this document, so I will revisit this at another point in time as well. But I just want to say thank you guys. That was really like the highlight overview, kind of like the big takeaways for me. And yeah, I just want to say thank you guys. I appreciate you guys for tuning in as always, and until next time, au revoir.